Good evening. Welcome to the Power Live. So this is called Illegal Insight with Power. Yes, so in the next 3 days I'm going to talk about public debt, national public debt, and why young people should be concerned. So my name is Mputa Ngalande, otherwise known as Power. Yes, so today a presentation that I'm going to do is basically key public debt concepts. So we're going to look at, because if I start talking about the impact that the debt is going to cause for this country, I might seem baseless. So first of all, we will understand today what key concepts of debt, public debt are. Then when we get the public debt key concepts, then that's when now we'll move to the impact, and then at last we'll talk about debt transparency, which is more important per se, and solutions. So in these presentations, I'm going to do even solutions. So this is the first presentation today, which is like I said, which will be on key public debt concepts. So basically what we are going to understand today with this is so we're going to understand key public debt concepts. Then when is public debt bad, key indications that show that public debt apa yamba kuipa public debt. Then Zambia public debt position. So we are also going to look at the public debt position of Zambia right now. So basically, let me move now into what is public debt. What is public debt? So public debt is basically the how much the country owes outside or within the country. That is a public debt. So how much the Zambian people owe in this case within the country and outside the country from individuals. So maybe we can go borrow from one of the rich people. We say, okay, I think this person Dangote can finance us, and we go borrow from Dangote. Businesses and governments and international institutions. International institutions include IMF, IMF, the World Bank, the African Development Bank. So those are some of the institutions that can lend us, international institutions, even governments. So the government of the Republic of China can decide to borrow us money, so we can contract debt in that sense. So that is basically what debt is. And there are various types of instruments. However, according to the IMF, public debt instruments consist of the following. So the special drawing rights, which is also called the SDRS. So this one, it is it was formed in this initiative was brought about by the IMF in 1969. So what basically this is where in this instrument we have five countries that contest it. The latest that was added is China. So the interest grows every week, and the status of the same special drawing rights is checked every week. So the interest is grows every week, and after 5 years they review it and add new members. And China was added just in 2016. So we in this group we have China, we have the United States, the UK. Yeah, so this is one of the instruments. But there's also currency, there's also deposits, there's debt security, and then there's also loans, insurance schemes. So insurance schemes, this is where, for example, we have NAPSA, and people give money to NAPSA. As a citizen, you give money to NAPSA. So NAPSA has a lot of money at some point, and the government takes that money and use it for development. Since we have saved that money, even insurance, they issue bonds and we get that money. So those are some of the instruments that bring about national debt instruments, so public debt instruments. So that's where some of the debt come from, and more especially local borrowing, or the money that we owe locally from local creditors. Now, so why does government borrow? I might pose this question to everyone that is watching. Why do you borrow? What is the reason that you borrow? The same reasons that you have, also the government has the same reasons that we borrow. If I look at, I have borrowed a couple of times, and debt is not bad. Yeah. So ideally, government resort to borrowing due to fiscal deficit. So this is one word that is used a lot when budget presentation are being done in parliament. So immediately you hear the word, our 2021 budget fiscal deficit is going to be this much. That means the government is saying we are going to borrow this much, right? So immediately we hear that word, then we know that the government is saying next year they are going to borrow this much. So the fiscal deficit in the budget, which means the revenue, the money that we are getting from the revenue is not enough to finance that budget, and there is a shortfall. So that shortfall, if the government borrows in order to finance the debt, the budget, I mean. So financial deficit also defined as excess or total budget expenditure over revenue. Like I said, you are getting less money but spending more money. So that in order to bridge that gap, the government borrows. Yeah. In simple words, the amount of borrowing the government has to meet the expense. So you want to buy a phone and you only have a 400, and you want an iPhone. So you say, okay, since the iPhone, the cheapest costs 1,000 and you have a 400, so you go borrow a 600. That is the deficit. And so when the government says, no, the 2021 deficit is 2 billion kwacha, then which means they're saying they're going to borrow 2 billion kwacha. Yeah. So ideally, public debt is a source of extra funds to invest in the economic growth. Public debt allows government to raise funds to grow the economy or pay for services. So that money, they get it to pay for services, as we all know, so that we have medicine in the clinics, and we pay our civil servants. Types of debt. So types of debt, as we move to types of debt, by source, where creditor is based. Where creditor is based. So domestic debt, debt owned to creditors from within Zambia. Commercial banks are included. So we hear of bonds, government bonds. There's this new called COVID bond. So people, institutions, banks go and invest in those, put money in those bonds. So the government gets money from people in terms of bonds, which they will get dividends. And then there's external debt. External debt owned to foreign creditors which are abroad. So for example, if the government borrows from the IMF, they borrow from the World Bank, they borrow from the famous Paris Club, they get money in that sense, then it becomes the international debt. So external debt, I mean. So creditors. So what type of creditors do we have? We have bilateral debt. So bilateral debt is a debt between a single borrower and a single lender, debt owned by one government to the other. For example, China decides to borrow us as an individual. China itself says, okay, I'll borrow Zambia. So that is what bilateral a bilateral debt. And moreover, sometimes the Paris Club. So Paris Club is a group of creditors, international creditors that come together, and countries and come together that form the club called Paris Club. So this is an international institution that borrows money to countries, right? And other big institutions that want to borrow money. So that is it for bilateral. Take note of these creditors, and as we move on in the next 2 days, or maybe today, I'll talk about which type of debt that Zambia has contracted, and what are the implications and repercussions for that debt that they have gotten. So multilateral debt is owned to a consortium of creditors like the World Bank, IMF, or regional development banks. For example, SADC decides they will want to lend Zambia money. So SADC is a consortium, is an organization, it is a consortium of countries, and they decide that they want to lend Zambia money. So that is what we mean by multilateral. You can just hear even the word multi, which means a lot, more than one. And then there was commercial debt. So commercial debt is a debt owned to private sector creditors and commercial banks, private bonds, commercial bank loans, and others. So these are what we call commercial debt. So commercial debt, commercial banks, they give debt. And then two types of debt. So there is consensual debt. So consensually is the extent to which the terms of a loan are more favorable to the borrower. So if you hear consensually, which means the loan or the debt is more favorable to the borrower. That borrower is borrowing on less interest. For example, the interest rate is at 20%, and then someone decides to give you money at 10%, which means it is more favorable to you who will be paying back the money. For I want to borrow Kaloba, and then someone just says, okay, so my Kaloba, I do it at 70%, but since it is you, you do it at 15%. You top up 15% amount. Now, consensual debt, though no clear definition, refers to debt acquired at low interest rates than market or private interest rate. So, like I said, that's basically consensual debt, where you borrow on less interest. Now, non-consensual debt. So there's consensual and non-consensual. Take note of this. Which one is simple and which one is hard, and which one Zambia has contracted. As I will go forward and talk about this. Which one that Zambia has contracted and what are the implications, like I said. So non-consensual debt acquired at the market level or private interest rate, usually non-negotiable, and unique to time and place. Note, bilateral loans likely have the high interest rate than World Bank, but still are called consensual. So bilateral are called consensual, but sometimes they have higher rates, right? Okay. So now you have two people. You have a businessman. You go borrow from a businessman, and that person is in the business of giving money, and that person is there for business, right? So that is a non-consensual borrower. And then you have a friend that you know, and they have money, and then you go to them and say, boy, I want money. And then they say, okay, since it is you, they're just borrowing they're just giving you money for the sake, okay, since he's my friend, let me borrow him. So that person won't be that stiff compared to the person that is there strictly for business. This person is there for Kaloba. So this is the difference between consensual and non-consensual. So non-consensual is very strict. It is strict business. Time ikakuwa na yolipira bafunza ndrama zanga zili kuti. Yeah, unless wana chifundo. But when is public debt bad? So public debt is a two-edged sword. But when is it bad? Like I said, a two-edged sword is when it can either hate you or hate the other person. So you need to hold it very steady so that it does not hit you, but it hits the next person. In this case, it is debt that we're talking about. Since we're talking about debt, as we borrow money, we must be very steady that when we invest, we're investing in things that will make us pay back the money. So debt is not bad. Like I said, debt will never be bad, and debt is not bad, and Zambia is not the only country that has contracted debt. But the management and the reasons that we borrow are more important, and that is what causes why debt can be difficult to pay, and we can find ourselves in a situation where we are suffocating the economy. So what is public debt? When is public debt bad? Public debt and the GDP ratio, key indicators. So now these are key indicators when public debt is bad, right? When public debt is bad, these are key indicators. So public debt and GDP ratio. So public debt and GDP ratio. The GDP ratio should be above the public debt servicing. So public debt to GDP ratio is defined as the ratio of the total outstanding public debt or external debt to GDP. Right? And then the second point is by comparing what is a country owes with what it is producing. The debt to GDP ratio. So is the country producing as much as they owe? For example, if we're going to say the ratio of the GDP is 2%, and the debt is at 10%, then there's a problem there, because we are producing less and we owe people more. So even the company, if it is producing less and they owe people more, it becomes a problem, because the money that they are making cannot pay back the debt that they contracted. Yeah. So basically, that is what we call that is the difference. That is one key indication. So when the public debt and GDP ratio do not tally, the ratio of the GDP is lower than the ratio of public debt, then it becomes a problem and the economy starts to suffocate. So let's ask ourselves, what is happening in Zambia? Are we there? When is public debt bad? So we'll continue with this question. I'll be asking this question as I go. So public debt is good. Public debt is good. It springs economic growth until it starts suffocating the economy. There are key proven indicators used to determine the sustainability of public debt, usually by IMF and World Bank. So World Bank makes sure there are key elements that they issue out, even guidelines that they say, okay, this is what each country that want to borrow they should look at, and they should not surpass these lines. So the critical limits of these indicators are exceeded to public debt, because a dangerous phenomenon for nation, and there is a risk that the country will not be able to meet its obligation in future. So they will not allow you to borrow, especially IMF and World Bank, when they do a risk assessment and they know that what you are saying, it is not possible for you to pay back the money in the future, then they do not borrow you the money. So when is public debt bad? Key indicators: debt servicing and domestic revenue ratio. So debt servicing, another indicator, debt servicing and domestic revenue ratio. So domestic revenue, how much revenue are we collecting, and how much is it compared? Is it above the percentage of the money that we are supposed to pay as Zambia? The revenue that we are collecting, is it enough? Is it higher than debt servicing percentage that we need to pay at that particular year or at that particular time? So the ratio is used to measure the government's sustainability and ability to mobilize adequate domestic revenue to meet debt obligation. In case in the indicator over time, indicates that the country may have budgetary problems in servicing the debt. Are we having budgetary problems in servicing the debt? Of course, yes. Of course, yes. We're having problems, budgetary problems, because of servicing the debt. So, which means, where are we as Zambia? So I do not want to preempt the future presentation, like the tomorrow presentation and the other day's presentation. External debt. So these are key indicators why when public debt becomes bad. So external debt payments are proportional of exports. So are we exporting as much as we owe? Are we surpassing the export, like I said earlier? The percentages, how are they expressed? Huh? How are they expressed as we begin to move forward? The ratio of us exporting and the ratio of us servicing the debt, is it tallying? If it is not, then we are in big trouble, because some of the debt that we owe is in dollars, and at the time that we borrowed, the kwacha was low compared to a dollar. So we got money when the dollar was at 5 kwacha, and now we have to pay back in dollars when the kwacha is at 18 kwacha. So do the math. So we need more kwachas, and for us to get more kwachas, the only way we can survive is by exports, because exports we're being paid in dollars, and because we are being paid in dollars, it is very easy for us to meet that debt that we have outside. So basically, those are some of the key indicators when public debt becomes bad. Now, Zambian debt situation. So this is the last presentation for today, as we look at the key concepts of public debt. So the Zambian public debt situation. Zambian's public debt has grown in the recent years. Has hugely grown in the recent years. In the same period, however, Zambia has experienced acute public service delivery and financing and coupled dwindling economy growth. So the economy is going like. So in that regard, there have been questions from the public and other relevant stakeholders, not only on the sustainability of the debt levels in Zambia, but also on the utilization of the borrowed funds to spur economic growth, as well as improving public service delivery. Are services being delivered accordingly? That is the question that we must ask ourselves. Do we have medicine in hospitals? Do we have paper in government institutions? As of 2018, Zambia was part of the 25 low-income countries that were considered to be at high risk of debt distress. So 25 among the low-income countries that were considered that was 2018. Zambia was considered to be among the 25 low-income countries that will be considered for high-risk debt distress. So they predicted that we are heading in that direction. What do you think? Are we in that direction? So these are questions that will be answered. I'm asking these questions so that we understand as I explain this. So let's move now. Zambian public debt situation. Domestic debt in billion kwacha. So I'll start from 2012. So 2012, Zambia owed, and this is domestic debt now, the debt that we owned locally. So the first year is 2012. So 2012 we owed 15.07 billion 15.07 billion in kwacha. And then 2013 we had 19.7 billion. So from 15 to 19. So from 19 we moved to 23.53 in 2014. So in 2014 23.3. So we moved from 19 to 23. So in 2015 we had 24.7 billion in kwacha, money owned locally. And then we moved to 32.9 in 2016. So 32.96 in 2016 billion in 2016, that is kwacha. And then in 2017 we moved to 48.36 billion kwacha, locally, money borrowed locally. And then we had the 58.26 billion in 2018. So 58.26. So from 48 we moved to 58 billion in 2018. And in 2019 we moved from 58 to 82. So let's do the math. Between 58 minus 80, we'll find the difference there, and you know that in 2019 we borrowed massively. We borrowed very, 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 very high. From 58 we moved to 80.2% a billion that we borrowed. Now external debt. Mind you, this is the other one. The local debt is in kwacha. This one now is in dollars. So we have the 2012. Again, I'll start from 2012. 2012 we have $3.8 billion. That is external debt. In 2013 we have 3. So we maintained 2012 and 2013 we maintained. We maintained. So the only difference is the last digit, which is the other one is 50. The other one is the 2012 one is 18. The other one is 50. But all the same. We had the 3.18 billion in 2012, and then 3.52 billion in 2013, and then in 2014 we had 4.79 billion that we borrowed in dollars, external debt. So we again in 2015 we had 6.7 billion that we borrowed in dollars, and then in 2016 we had 6.95 billion that we borrowed. That is 2019. That is 2016. And in 2017 we borrowed 8.74 in 2017, and then in 2018 we borrowed 10.05 billion. And then in 2019 we borrowed 11.12. So this is it is not that all the debt was borrowed. The 11 billion was borrowed there, but we kept on. So we pay a little and then we borrow more. We pay a little, we borrow more. So it keeps on piling, and the percentage keep growing like that. So we move on now. Okay, so like I said at first, there was type of debt that we borrowed and how flexible those people are. People that are borrowing us that money, right? How flexible. Like I said, there are some people that are there for business and they are borrowing for business specifically. So ikakuwa na time yako wafuna ndrama zao wakamta bati wazatambi check one that give me money. So we said my retro is a bit okay, and bilateral is a bit okay. These can be manageable. Export and supplies credit. So sometimes we do not borrow financially. We borrow goods. So we say okay, 8% into verse and then we'll pay back. So these are export and supply credits. And then commercial. So commercial in 2010. So this time I'll start from 2010. So in 2010, the commercial debt, which is, why am I talking only about the commercial here? I want us to know, because the commercial one is the one that is non-negotiable. It is a non-consensual debt. So yes, we borrowed these other debts, but let's look at the one that can make us sweat. So in 2010, we were almost at 0% in borrowing commercial debt. In 2011, same. In 2012, we borrowed commercially. We borrowed about 100. Let me do this so that I'm giving accurate figures. Okay, so in 2010 we had almost to none commercial debt. In 2011 we almost had none. In 2012 we started borrowing a commercial debt. So let me just turn the camera so that you see what I'm talking about, so that so like I said, so in 2012, in 2010, here in 2010 we are here, right? In 2010, so this yellow commercial, so commercial is in yellow, and then the red one is supplies and supplies credit, and then we have the multilateral in black there. So here is in 2010. So the yellow one is the one I'm interested in. So the yellow one is this is 2011. We do not have yellow. Then in 2012 we have like this. 2012 we have this yellow here. So you see the chart starts to grow. The chart is growing. The chart is growing. We are borrowing more commercial. So because what commercial borrowers do is, the more they don't care if you have debt or whatever, them they just want to borrow you so that they can make money. They are there for business, and they know you are a government, and they'll borrow you like that. So in 2019, that is where we stand, right? That's where we stand. So the yellow keeps growing like that. So from 2011 almost to zero, we have borrowed like this now. Yeah, so hopefully now we understand what credit we have contracted as Zambia. Today I'm just explaining the key notes and concepts on this public debt. But tomorrow, that's now when we will go into details. So now let's move to Zambian public debt servicing situation. So Zambian public debt servicing situation. In 2014, we serviced a domestic debt. We serviced 12%, 5% international debt. In 2015, we serviced 12%. That is a domestic debt, and then 9% international debt, external debt, and then 2016 we financed 5%, 22% I mean, and then 14% of external debt, 13% internal debt in 2017, and then 15% external debt. In 2018 we serviced 18% external debt, 18% internal debt. And then in 2019 we serviced 26% external debt and 20% domestic debt. So those are the figures for now. Now, debt as the share of the GDP. Debt as share of the GDP. So this is how the curve looks. Let me again turn the camera. This is how the curve looks. So this is how the curve looks, right? Yeah, so we can see. So we are moving. We are moving now. So from there, 20. We're moving. Now we are even above 100%. We're now even above 100%. So this is debt as share of GDP. So basically those are some that is the situation that we have as Zambia in terms of debt, and then debt service as share of domestic revenue. So the domestic revenue, in 2019 we used 40% of our revenue to pay debt. In 2017 we used 29% of our debt to pay revenue. In 2014 we used 17%. In 2011 we used 11% of our revenue to pay debt. So it keeps growing. In 2011 we are using 11% of our debt. So out of the 100 that we get, we use only 11% to pay debt. But now we are using 40%, 46%, which is by World Bank recommendations or IMF recommendation. We are not supposed to exceed the revenue that we are collecting. We are not supposed to surpass 40% or going up there. Then by the revenue that you are getting, you start paying 40%. So we are not supposed to reach those numbers. When you reach those numbers, then debt has become bad and it is no longer good. As of 2019, Zambia had benchmarked the threshold of almost all critical debt stability indicators. So by 2019, in terms of borrowing, we have reached the stage of mwana kanapara. Ni mwana akakanapara mchakwatu ni mwana adwarisa ni mwana vintu vavuta mwana kakanapara. So ndepene inafika economy 2019 we knew that hapa economy yakanapara. Because of why the debt is suffocating the economy. So the total public debt GDP ratio is at 70%. The total external public debt to GDP is over 40%. Government debt repayment and government revenue is over 40%. So government debt repayment to government revenue is over 40%, confirms with the 2020 budgetary allocation. So the 2020 budgetary allocation is for 40% of the revenue will go to debt servicing. 40% of the revenue, as the minister presented. So what does Zambia debt position mean to public service delivery? That's where I'll end for today. That's where I'll end for today. So I want to leave us with a question: what does Zambia debt position mean to public debt delivery? So in our next presentation, we are going to discuss the impact of debt distress on public service delivery. That's what we're going to talk about tomorrow at the same time, 20 hours, same page. Power, illegal or legal insight. So for today, we're going to end here. I hope maybe I've done justice. I'm not an economist. I'm just a passionate young Zambian that looks at these things critically. And thank you very much for using some of the slides for Action Aid, especially the technical data. I got it to one of the presentation from Action Aid. Yeah. So basically, that is one for today. So the views and opinions expressed in this live recording does not represent any organization that I'm affiliated to. These are my personal views and these are my personal opinion. Yeah, so don't see we should not say no because I'm affiliated to a certain organization and that is where the views are coming from. These are coming from me being a passionate Zambian and being concerned because in the next 15 years I will be living in Zambia, maybe in the next 20 years, in the next 30 years, and this debt will have an impact on my life, and no wonder I cannot relent and stop talking about it. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for those that watched and for the support. I'm seeing people here that have commented, that we are watching. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow, same time, 20 hours. And yeah, Aruta continua.